What's up, everybody? Happy 2023. Welcome to the SevereMMA YouTube page. I am Spencer Kyte, your friendly neighborhood Spencer man, and I am here to start my 2023 Fighters to Watch series. I got to calm myself down here. I get excited for this one because this is one that I've been doing for a number of years in a various number of spots. It is the best example of what I'm passionate about, or the best example of my passion for this sport. What we will do over the next set of days, number of days, is go division by division, and I will go through and outline every athlete in that weight class that I'm looking forward to seeing compete in 2023 for one reason or another. Some of them will be completely obvious, right? Champion in each weight class. Certainly looking forward to seeing them compete. The obvious top contenders, clearly want to see what they can do. The top names, the top prospects, certainly obvious candidates. But there will also be less obvious ones. There will be the names that just kind of stick out to me. There will be the under the radar prospects. There will be the veterans that I think maybe we haven't seen the best of yet. There will be some people that have maybe had a little bit of a backslide in 2022 or are coming off a year away or something of that nature. It is me sitting down, as I like to do, with a spreadsheet, going division by division through the list of fighters active in the UFC, putting them in alphabetical order and just rattling them off. In previous years, this has been a written labor of love that takes a great deal of time, a great deal of energy, a great deal of output. I really enjoyed doing it, but this is a quicker version. It is a version that is more readily consumable by everybody. I understand. I'm learning. 2022 was a year of learning and understanding for me that not as many people want to sit and read 3,000 words on the Strawweights to watch. And that is where we are going to start. In the 115-pound weight class, we are going to work from 115 all the way up to heavyweight, one division each day. So in the instances where there are men's and women's sides of those divisions, we will do both. So those will be longer videos. Day like today, we're going to kick it off at Strawweight, just the ladies. Not a great big group, but also not the smallest group. So let's just get into it. The fighters to watch for 2023, my fighters to watch for 2023 in the strawweight division begins with Mackenzie Dern, who is 29 years old, 12-3 overall, but she's only 1-2 in her last three. And you could argue that she's 0-3, right? The win in there is a close fight with Tecia Torres. This one maybe feels a little, right? We're starting with one that might feel a little like, what is there to watch about Mackenzie Dern? And here's the reason she's here and that she's leading things off. Other than, alphabetical. She's an absolute menace on the ground. Even in her loss to Yan Xiaonan, her last fight of this year, we saw in those moments that she got the fight to the ground, that she is an absolute menace. We know this about her. But she struggles to get the fight there. She struggles to just dictate where the fight is going to take place. The striking is coming along, but it still needs to get better. The mechanics up, both mechanically and in terms of execution, right? She's still a little robotic and a little forced and labored in her striking. And she's still a little rudimentary as well. Like, it would be really great if Mackenzie Dern could add on some different layers over this next couple of years. But she's ranked 7th in the division. She's only lost to people ahead of her. Like, this sort of feels a little bit like a make or break year for her. If she's going to become a legitimate contender, this feels like the year where we have to see some of those developments. This feels like the year where we need to see her get better at getting inside and get better at wrestling and being able to drag the fight to the ground, where she's not having to pull guard all the time, where she's able to go from getting inside and getting, let's say, a body lock or a waist lock, and using that to climb into positions, or using that and developing greater strength to be able to pull people down to the canvas, rather than jumping guard and trying to entice them in and grabbing a leg and sort of working that way. I still think the potential is there, right? We've seen Mackenzie Dern at her best, in her best moments, has looked great. Now, that hasn't come against the best competition she's faced. The best competition she's faced, Amanda Ribas, Marina Rodriguez, and Yan Xiaonan, all got the better of her. But there is still something there. We've seen it. We've seen glimpses of the power. We've seen the development of the striking with Jason Perillo. And I just wonder, just curious to see if this year, a little bit more experience, a little bit more time with Perillo, a little bit more work, a little greater understanding of the things that she needs to do to ultimately reach maybe her greatest level, her ultimate upside. Can she put that together in the year to come? It's going to be interesting to see. She's, as I said, she's ranked number 7 in the division. It's a good pack ahead of her. There's going to be some people coming up through the ranks behind her that will be targeting her and looking to take her spot. And so it'll be really interesting to me to see what happens with Dern this year. Next up, Emily Ducote, who had a 1-1 rookie year in the UFC in 2022. She just turned 28. She beat Jessica Panay in her debut, lost to Angela Hill in her second fight. She's 6-2 overall at strawweight. And I think for me, the big reason that she's on this list is that I'm really curious to see what that Angela Hill loss teaches her and what she learns from that setback. That was a fight where Angie Hill came out and knew the way to beat her, understood what I need to do to get the victory here. And that's volume, volume, volume. Be first the whole time. She's going to be willing to stand with me. So I've just got to get off ahead of her. And Ducote couldn't adjust. She couldn't break that rhythm. She couldn't get out of that position. And that's okay. We see that happen, right? Like that's a thing that happens from time to time with these athletes. It's just, you get in there and you get stuck against somebody that's a little more experienced and a little more savvy than you, and they get the better of things. It happens. The key and big reason why she's here is adjusting from that, is learning from that, is taking that and going back to the gym and saying, okay, this is what happened. What are 3 things I can do in order to, 1, negate that from happening again, do my best to not let that happen again, but also understand what to do when it does, or if it does start happening again. The skills are there. We've seen it, right? You don't come in on your debut and beat Jessica Panay. You don't have the success she had in Invicta in this weight class without the skills being there. 28 years old, still relatively young, still time to put this together. I think this is a good year for her. I think the rookie year was solid. It established her as somebody that we need to pay attention to in the strawweight division. And I want to see how much more she can grow in her sophomore campaign in the octagon. Next up, the former champ, Carla Esparza. She's in such an interesting place to me right now because we saw over the course of her run to the fight with Rose earlier last year. It's weird to me that it's already a new year, and I'm going to probably for most of January, I will say earlier this year, and I will correct myself as we go. But we saw throughout the run to the fight with Rose that she's able to deal with adversity, get the wins that she needs to win in order to get to where she wants to go, which was back to a championship opportunity. She made the most of it. Now she's coming off another fight where she just got trucked, right? She's now had the belt twice and failed to defend it and gotten beaten soundly in each of those championship defenses. And so I think she's going to be up against it. I think the road back to a title is going to be even longer for Carla Esparza. If that's the path she is looking to go down, and I'm quite certain that it is, that road's going to be longer than it was. And it was already pretty long the last time. She's 35 now. The athleticism in terms of the rest of the upper echelon of the division isn't quite there, but she is grimy. She is a grinder, and we know she can still go out and out wrestle a bunch of people. And so I kind of want to see twofold. What does the UFC do with Carla Esparza when she's ready to return? And then what does Carla Esparza want to do? Does she want to get back into the chase for a title at 35, having been there twice, knowing that it's going to take, if I had to guess, 6 wins, depending on how everything else in the division shakes out, but probably 6 wins? Does she want to go through that? Or does she want to just be competitive and just continue to fight and take on sort of a maybe Rafael Dos Anjos role that we saw at welterweight prior to when he went down, and now again subsequently that he's been back, where you're sort of the last line before the upper echelon? Because I think that's where Carla Esparza sits right now. Obviously, she's got wins in there, right? Yan Xiaonan is up towards the top of the division. Carla Esparza crushed her in her fight to earn the championship opportunity. And so she's an interesting figure in this division. And I'm really curious to see how it all shakes out. I think it's going to be telling, the first booking she gets in 2023. That'll let us know both where the UFC is at with her and also maybe where she is at in terms of what she's willing to accept in terms of matchups. We continue on with the fighters to watch in the strawweight division in 2023 with Lupi Godinez. She feels similar to me to Emily Ducote in that she struggled against her toughest test, Angela Hill. We've seen the strength, we've seen the power, we've seen the very good wrestling, the boxing solid. She just feels to me like an athlete that just needs more time, right? Needs more experience, needs to be in the gym with more experienced opponents. And that's, listen, not a knock on Titan MMA from out here in Vancouver area. It just is what it is, right? You need to be, when you're competing at this level, you need to be training with people at this level. You can't be head and shoulders above everybody else in the room. And I would wager that at Titan, she is head and shoulders above everybody in the room. Now, there's probably some guys that she can go with that'll give her great rounds, but that doesn't even necessarily prepare you properly, because men and women built differently, strength differently, all of these different things are totally different, which makes sense. So it was always good to see when she was going down and training with Alexa Grasso down in Mexico. That's a good look, right? That's a good group to be with. And so I just want to see, like, Godinez is someone who now more than half of her fights have been in the UFC. And it feels weird saying that, right? She had the busy first year where she fought 4 times, tried to fight a 5th. She got a couple in last year, some good performances, some not good. Even like saying the loss to Angie Hill was a not good performance. It's not that it wasn't a good performance. It was still a good performance. It was a close fight. It was one of those fights where you don't lose any ground by losing to Angela Hill. She was favored going into that. And so with another year under her belt, with a little bit more experience, do we see some changes in terms of where she's training, how she's preparing, and then what she's able to bring to the octagon when she does get in there? I still think the upside is pretty high because the power is good. The wrestling is really good. And we'll see if we see some of that this year. We move on to somebody who I've mentioned a number of times already, Angela Hill. She did a great job against both Lupi Godinez and Emily Ducote in understanding who she is as an athlete, as a competitor. And my question going into this year, the reason she's on this list, and again, she's probably one that people are like, what is there to figure out about Angela Hill? She's 37. She's been in the UFC forever. She's 15-12 overall. We know what we're going to get from her. I'm not 100% sure she's a finished product. And that sounds crazy because she's 37 and she's been in the UFC for 20 fights now, right? One of the most active, most accomplished, established female fighters on the roster, if not the leader. But I think we're still seeing Angie grow. Like I still think we're seeing developments from her and sort of steps forward in her understanding of how to do some stuff in there. And so she had a bunch of those losses earlier in her career, those close fights, those split decisions, where she often came away feeling like, man, this sucks. Like, I thought I did enough. Well, she got into 2 fights this year that had the makings of maybe going that way, and she didn't let them go that way. And I'm gonna watch in 2023 if she gets an opportunity to fight someone ahead of her. So if she gets in there with a Mackenzie Dern, can she go out and win that fight and move a little bit further ahead than she has ever before in her career? We know the level that Angie Hill is. Can she go a step or two more in 2023? That's why she's on this list. That's why she's here. Next up, Yazmin Lucindo. So she debuted against Yazmin Jauregui in San Diego. She took a loss, but look, she turns 21 years old on Sunday. Like, she's not 21 yet. And so that right there is enough of a reason for me to watch. We have a 20-year-old fighter on the day that I am recording this, January 2nd. You will watch it on the 3rd or later. But we have a 20-year-old who has already been in there. She has 18 pro fights. She's 13-5 already. She looked good against Jauregui. We've seen Jauregui go out and get another victory. I'll talk about her next. Alphabetically, she is next in line. But like, you want to give me a 21-year-old that looked okay in her debut and tell me I get some time to see more development and see more growth? Like it says in my notes, she is the perfect wait and see how she develops fighter. These are the exact types of athletes that I want to follow year on year. And I know that it's hard. I know that it's difficult. And this is sort of the reason that I always have done this, is to say at the start of the year, there's all these fighters on the roster, right? Whatever the number is, somewhere close to 600. Whittling it down to the even half of that, right? Whittling it down to 300 is hard. But here are the people that it makes sense for you to pay attention to, that show us something, that tell me something from what I've seen from them already, that make them interesting going forward. Not all of these athletes are going to pan out. There are going to be people on here that I'm very curious about, that I'm high on, that I think could have bright futures, that just flounder, right? Kay Hansen is someone that 2 years ago, coming into 2021, I thought she was the best prospect in this division. She's not in the UFC anymore. We don't know that she's going to continue fighting because OnlyFans is doing so well for her. Sometimes you're right, sometimes you're wrong, but Yazmin Lucindo is somebody that I think we should just keep an eye on, right? If we're going to keep an eye on Raul Rojas as an 18-year-old, and we're going to keep an eye on Cameron Saman and Francis Marshall, some names that you will hear later on this week in different weight classes, then pay attention to the 21-year-old Brazilian who looked good in her debut, has 18 fights, and is going to get a chance to get her feet under her to establish herself in 2023. As I mentioned a second ago, next up is Yazmin Jauregui, 2-0 in the UFC, 10-0 overall. She turns 24 at the end of February. She made my list of the top 10 prospects in the UFC that I put out on Monday on OSDB Sports. I just think when you look at the composure and poise that she showed in her last fight against Estela Nunes, getting knocked down and getting hurt, clearly being hurt early in that fight, to get up, make the adjustment needed to avoid that happening again. She threw a naked leg kick, ate a right hand, got dropped. Didn't throw any more naked leg kicks or set them up better when she did. That she almost won that first round and then came out in the second and was like, we're just going to get this done. She looks good. She trains with a good team at Entrim. Clearly has a diverse skill set, has good jiu-jitsu. We've seen the striking so far in these 2 fights. She's somebody that at, not quite 24 yet, 10-0, getting some UFC experience. I don't think she is going to be rushed. That's the really nice thing about this division with some of these prospects. There's a lot of people in that top half, in that top 10, that are established but still haven't fought each other, and you can move them around and match them up, especially when the new champion at the top of the division right now. Excuse me. And so I think Jauregui is going to get a chance in her sophomore year to just get 2 or 3 more fights at reasonable steps up each time out, depending on what happens, right? I don't think she's going to be somebody that next time out is facing Mackenzie Dern or is even facing Angela Hill. I think she'll be more of a couple of steps, and we see where we're at. But I'm really curious because I like what I see. And I think she's somebody that has legitimate top 10 upside. Next up is Amanda Lemos. She's the biggest power threat in the division. Like she is for this division. Not quite what Derek Lewis is at heavyweight. Like it's not quite that, but it's pretty close. We saw that in the Marina Rodriguez fight, right? Things are going okay. It's pretty competitive. It's a good, tough fight. And then just, she's got that one-shot power that when it lands, you're put on skates, and she's great at finishing. She knows for a finish, instincts for finish are great. And right now, coming off of that victory, even though she lost to Jessica Andrade earlier in the year, I would say she's no more than one fight away from a title shot. She may get next for knocking out Marina Rodriguez that way and having Zhang Weili at the top of the division now. She might get next, especially with Andrade fighting at flyweight next time out. That's why she's not included here. I think she could be a real factor. And the reason she's such a fascinating fighter for me this year is that I think it can go either way. Like she's somebody that I can see her having tremendous success, but I can also see her struggling. I can also see her really struggling, even against somebody like Carla Esparza that could just take her down and put her on the ground and wrestle her. Even against somebody like Yan Xiaonan, who just is able to move a little bit better and gets out of the way and deals. Like Amanda Lemos and Rose Namajunas is a phenomenally interesting, incredibly interesting fight to me. And I would love to see it. And so I'm, as my notes say, I'm intrigued to see who she gets matched up with next, what happens in terms of this division, because she's very much in the championship mix. She is a threat every time she crosses the threshold because of that power, because of those finishing instincts. She's one I'm paying super close attention to. I've circled, highlighted the whole nine. Amanda Lemos is one of those people for me in 2023 based on who she gets, especially for what her first fight is. Really, really interesting to me. Next up, Loma Lukebunmi. Reason she's here is I think it's just a question of I want to see, is there more advancement to come? She turns 27 later this month. She's 4-2 in the UFC. It's only been 10 fights thus far, 7-3. We've seen some good. We've seen some in too deep, right? She lost to Angela Hill. You can't falter for. Lost to Lupi Godinez. Can't really falter for. I think Lupi is a little bit further ahead. And so what has yet another year of being in the UFC, of having a couple of fights, of having more training with the Hickman brothers, of getting that more exposure and that more experience and really being that much further into her transition to MMA from Muay Thai done in terms of her development. Can there be more? Or are we at the upper limits of what she can do? She's set to face Elise Reed at UFC 284 in Perth in February. And I think that's a really solid litmus test, really solid gauge of where she's at, because Elise Reed is good, but not great. It's a fight that if you ask me today, I would probably pick Lukebunmi just because of a little bit more strength. I like the diversity of her game a little bit more. And I think she's confident without being Elise Reed confident. Elise Reed, who doesn't make this list, to be clear. And so I think that fight is going to be the one that sort of gives me a little bit better understanding of whether Loma stays on this list and remains somebody that I'm curious to continue to watch develop, or whether we've seen the development and this is sort of not quite a finished product, but pretty close. Do some polishing up on the edges, but this is sort of where she's going to be. We'll find that out very, very early in this year. Next up, I've got some people out of order here, so I'm going to just kind of jump around on my list. I don't know how the one at Pinheiro jumped ahead of some people, so we're going to do a little cut and paste on the fly here. I know I don't have to tell you these things, but when I'm, doing stuff and not talking about the athletes that I said I'm going to talk about, I want to fill you in. So here we go. The cut and paste is done. Next up, Corey McKenna. We had a talk about Corey McKenna, myself, Ian O'Neill, and Harry Powell on one of the preview shows, or maybe on the takeaways, the year-end takeaways, which an absolute pleasure to do. If you haven't watched it yet, it is here on the YouTube page. It was put out on the Patreon as well, so you can listen to just the audio. It's like 5 hours of us going month to month, just talking about a bunch of stuff. It was absolutely a joy to record, and I couldn't recommend it more. Please go check it out. So Corey McKenna, she's 23 years old. And that to me is the first part of why I'm continuing to watch. She's 23. She's got 10 fights. She's just a baby. But she's 3-1 in the UFC as well. And that's another piece of this, right? As much as it hasn't been the cleanest, as much as it hasn't been the prettiest, she's been successful. And the one loss was bad decision-making, bad fight IQ against Elise Reed in London in March after a long time off. And so you can even rope in a little bit of that long time off factoring in there. But she's got good strength for this division. She's a good grappler. The striking is limited, and it always is going to be. She has a really short reach. It's always going to be hard for her. And so what I'm really curious to see in 2023, as we talked about, myself and the boys, is there further development? Does she get back to the gym after these fights, after this last outing against Cheyenne Vlismas, which was a close fight and probably didn't need to be as close a fight as it was? And do they sit down and say, okay, we need to just grapple from second one to whenever it's done, grapple, because we can't stand outside with these fighters that have better reaches than us. We're just going to get picked apart, and we shouldn't be giving up rounds and catching strays when we don't have to, when we can get inside and put people on the canvas. I think there's clearly upside. You don't go 3-1 in the UFC at her young age, right? You don't have 3 wins in the UFC at 23 years old in a division where it's not like you're fighting absolute scrubs for a while. Everybody that she's fought, good competition. There aren't any easy outs in this division. So there's clearly upside. Can she make the most of that, or make more of that? Continue to cultivate that in 2023. That's why I'm watching. Next up, this is a hopeful one. Hopefully, I literally get to watch Kanako Murata compete in 2023. She did not compete in 2022. She hasn't fought since June of 2021 after suffering a broken arm in her fight with Verna Jandiroba that she lost. Obviously, break your arm, tend to lose a fight. But she's got wins over Emily Ducote, former UFC fighter Reina Marcos as well. That was in the UFC, not that it was pre. You got me. She's a former Invicta champ. She is a very good grappler. She could be, and the note says she could be a solid new-ish addition to the division because it's only been 2 fights in the UFC. She's 12-2 overall, though. And when she arrived in the UFC, there was good fanfare. There was a lot of interest. The fight with Marcos was a good initial test. She passed that very well. The fight with Jandiroba was a good fight. She lost. Fine. Verna Jandiroba is a good fighter. She's not on this list because I think she is fairly well established as who she is and what she is and sort of the limits of where she's going to go in this division. Kind of settled into that 9 through 13 range. But Murata is somebody that I can see moving forward if she's healthy, if she comes back, if we see her regularly. Or is she just sort of set adrift right now? Is she just sort of not sure what's happening right now? I know she has been training it in the past with the crew at Serra Longo and with Mizuki Inoue. Really curious to see if she can come back. And if she does, what we see from her, especially out of the gate. And I won't put too much weight on it because it will be her first fight since June 21. But she was somebody we thought had real upside and real potential to be a contender. And I shouldn't say we, I thought, can only speak for myself. I thought she had real upside. See if she can come back and deliver some of that again in 2023. Next up, the former champ Rose Namajunas, and this one's obvious, right? She's probably near the top of my fighters to watch, like regardless of weight class, because she's in such a weird position, man. Let's just lay it out there. She's in a weird goddamn position right now because she looked terrible against Carla Esparza. I mean, terrible. And people are going to say, oh, she looked terrible against Jillian Robertson too on the weekend when she got submitted real quickly in Fury. That doesn't count to me. And sorry, Cage Fury. That doesn't count to me. It's grappling. And Jillian Robertson is a division ahead of her, like size-wise, weight class-wise, is a bigger fighter, fights at flyweight, not at strawweight. B is a much better, much more comprehensive straight grappler than Rose Namajunas. And people that want to argue, oh, she's a UFC fighter just like Rose. No, Jillian Robertson competes in grappling more so than she does MMA, and she competes in MMA a lot. Like, she's legit in terms of her jiu-jitsu. We saw that in that fight. But the thing with Rose, as always, right? There's no question of the talent. There's no question of the skills and the abilities. Those things are locked in. We know. We're clear. The things that I question are the mentality and the mindset in terms of the want and the drive to do this and be the absolute best version of herself. And we've seen the best version of her several times. I don't know that it's always there, right? That's the lingering question. That's the always question with Rose. Is this the thing you want to do, or is there other things you want to do that occupy your mind and keep you from being the best fighter you can be? Which, if that's the case, fine, cool. I understand. I wouldn't want to fight forever, do other things. She has other pursuits. But the part that makes this really goddamn curious is that she's 2-0 against the champ. She's got 2 wins against Zhang Weili. And so there's an obvious, well, she's got the belt and I've already beaten her twice. So let me come back and get this belt again. But I don't think the UFC can hustle her right into a championship fight, regardless of the history, because of how bad the fight with Carla Esparza went. And so if she returns, when she returns, that first fight is going to be so fascinating to me. And I will be so transfixed because I want to see who it's against. I want to see how Rose comes out and looks in the early stages of that fight. I want to see what the corner dynamic is, because last time out, her fiance, Pat Barry, took the lead and Trevor Whitman took a back seat, which was jarring to me at the time. So I want to see if that changes. We know she can be the absolute best in this division. We've seen her beat the champion twice. Second one was close, but she's beaten her twice. Do we see it in 2023? Do we ever see it again? Do we ever get 18 months, 2 years of peak Rose Namajunas again? Don't know. Gonna pay close attention to see. Super curious. Next up, Luana Pinheiro. 29 years old, 10-1 overall, 2-0 in the UFC on an 8-fight winning streak overall, and one of several fighters on this list that are sort of in that emerging category, right? But haven't yet gotten into the real thick of the division where we start to find out some stuff. And I think 2023 is the year where we find out that stuff about Pinheiro. She hasn't fought since November 21 after a knee injury. She blew out her ACL, so I think she'll still be a few more months into 2023 before we see her again. And I think she's going to be in line for a step up in competition, because it's not make or break, and it's not shit or get off the pot, but it's let's just see, right? There's a few of these Contender Series graduates, we'll get to another one next, where there's no need to slow play them. They're 29, 30, 31. let's just see where they're at. If they can advance, great. If they need a step back, fine, we'll deal with it then. But let's stop doing the have them fight the lower third and get these victories. Let's see Luana Pinheiro when she's ready against a Jessica Penne, against an Angela Hill if Angie hasn't gone on and moved further up the hierarchy, against a Lupi Gadidez in a like competitive young talent fight. Let's see some of that. I think Pinheiro has the skill and has the upside to be interesting in this division. The grappling is good. The grappling is very solid. The striking's getting better. Surrounded by great team, great training partners. Nova Uniao, her boyfriend Matthias Nicolau. Like, getting good work in. When she gets healthy, when she gets back in there, let's see her against somebody ranked above her or like competitive, that it'll be a really competitive fight. Let it be a fight where I see the announcement and go, ooh, that's a tough assignment, because I want to see her in a tough assignment. And that'll tell me, again, whether she ends up on this list in 2024 or whether this is a thanks, we know where you stand, away we go. The same applies with this next fighter, Piera Rodriguez. 30 years old, 2-0 in the UFC, 9-0 overall. Tough, gritty, grimy, solid striking, fiery, like has looked good so far. 2 solid wins in the UFC, right? Came out, beat Kay Hansen in her debut, and then beat Sam Hughes last time out. It's 2 good wins, but like Pinheiro, it's how does she do with a step up? And let's just get the step up. Let's just do the next step. Rather than sit back and slow play this, let's take those steps. And look, if that's Yazmin Jauregui, cool. If that's Emily Ducote, great. If that's Mackenzie Dern, Carla Esparza, let's get some of these fights happening. As I said, 30 years old, unbeaten, has looked good thus far. Let's just test it out. There's some intrigue, certainly, but it's all going to come down to opponents and development. What further steps does she take working at a bunch of places, right? She's somebody that bounces around different gyms. All-Stars in Sweden, works with the Black House crew when she's stateside, been in Spain with Luke Barnett and his crew. Like, get her in there with somebody. Really interesting. Potential is there. There's upside. She could be interesting. But let's test her. Let's get those tests. Another one, same applies. Tabitha Ricci, baby shark, 27 years old. She turns 28 this year. 7-1 overall, 2-0 at Strawweight in the UFC. The one loss is a flyweight fight against Meno Fiorot, which, short notice, up a division, overmatched against the number 1 contender. No fault. Ricci feels to me like sort of a junior version of Mackenzie Dern, or a less experienced, less accomplished version of Mackenzie Dern. She's a quality grappler, but the striking is limited. She needs takedowns, right? She has to put you on the ground in order to have success. When she gets there, so far it's just been control as well. And so this year to me is a huge year for her development and for her advancement. She needs it to be a year of development and advancement, because you're only going to go so far taking people down and just kind of grinding them out and maintaining top position, both from a scoring and judging perspective, but also from a UFC perspective, right? They're not looking to showcase wet blankets. They're not looking to showcase fighters that just lay on top of their opponents and grind out 15 minutes and turn things into a slog. And so, does Ricci have more in there? Is there something else that can come? She's looked good. She's done well. Now it's time to see what else is there. I'll be paying attention. 3 left. First one, Marina Rodriguez. I feel bad for Marina Rodriguez. She entered 2022 as a top contender in the division, in my opinion. Won a split decision over Yan Xiaonan early in the year, which was, even that was a tough fight. And one of those like, Jesus, she's got to go through her to maintain her spot. That still didn't get her a championship opportunity. She got paired off with Amanda Lemos, lost that fight, and now has to take a step back in the rankings, in the queue, whatever. And the reason I'm really watching, and the reason she is on this list, is at 35 years old and coming off a fight where she was hurt bad, put on skates, the whole nine. It's going to be a long road back to contention, right? Like similar to Carla Esparza. The reason she was in there with Amanda Lemos is because the UFC wasn't in a hurry to get her into a championship opportunity. And now coming off a stoppage loss, it's not like they're going to just turn around and be like, yeah, win 2 and you're good. It's going to be 4, maybe 5, depending on who they are. And that's crazy to me. Like, that's wild to me. It wouldn't be that if I'm matchmaking, that's not what it is for me, but I'm trying to do this from an understanding their logic and their approach perspective. And so I think it would be 3 or 4 more wins to get back into the queue, because they want to do some of these fights like Rose Namajunas, like Mackenzie Dern, like Yan Xiaonan will get an opportunity. See if one of these young fighters can move forward. Shit, Angie Martinez. Shout out to Angie Martinez. Angela Hill will probably get an opportunity ahead of Marina Rodriguez if she can string together another couple victories and put a name on there. And so I really want to see what the next fight looks like. I think it will come in the second quarter of the year. I don't think we see her January to March. I think we see her somewhere April, May, June for the first one, and then get a second one later in the year on the back end of that. And we'll see who that is, who she's matched up with. That'll dictate a lot of things. She can get herself back in. The talent is there. The skills are there to get back into the mix and to push forward for that. Just not sure the opportunities are going to be there. And now we have to start asking about the chin and about the durability, because those are things we have to truly consider. We come to the champ, Zhang Weili. She reclaimed the title in November, dominating Carla Esparza after knocking out Joanna Jędrzejczyk in June at UFC 275. She's 23-3 overall. Her only losses in the last decade are to Rose Namajunas. Look, you're always going to pay attention to the champion. The things I'm really paying attention to and why I'm so curious is, 1, is she going to have to face Rose Namajunas again? 2, can she have a dominant reign? Like I thought when she won the title from Jessica Andrade, right? We saw the blitz, get her out of there in under a minute, win the belt. Good Lord. Winning streak continues. She's just smashing people. She goes out, she fights Joanna Jędrzejczyk in their classic right before the pandemic, wins that one in a tight, difficult fight where she had to dig deep. She had to win the 5th round, and she did. And I thought, man, nobody's getting this belt from her. Rose Namajunas comes out, kicks her in the head, gets the belt from her. They fight again, and it's close, but she couldn't get it back then. And so I want to see if that first run taught her some stuff. And if now in this second run and with these 2 subsequent wins this year, she's figuring out a little bit more of how to play to her strengths, how to be more active and aggressive and use all the tools that she has, because there's an abundance of skill and talent here, unlike many people in this division. And so I'm really curious. I want to see what the matchups are for her. I want to see if she can, as I said, build on sort of the first reign, take the lessons of the first reign, take the lessons of these last couple fights and just build on that, and maybe have that dominant reign that I thought she would have the first time around, this time around. We close out the strawweights with Yan Xiaonan. She lost to Marina Rodriguez early in 2022 and then came out and had a majority decision win for Mackenzie Dern in October. She is 16-3 with 1 no contest overall. She is 33 years old. And I'm watching because I just don't know where she fits. I really don't. And that's weird to say of somebody with that good of a record, whose losses are only against good competition in the UFC, Rodriguez and Carla Esparza. But she just always feels to me like she's a step, maybe even 2 steps behind that elite group. And again, that's weird to say, given that her fight with Marina Rodriguez was really close. But if she got matched up with Amanda Lemos today, I'm picking Lemos easily. I think Amanda Lemos blows through her. If she gets paired off with Rodriguez again, I think Rodriguez dominates that fight this time. I think Carla Esparza still beats her rather handily. I think Rose Namajunas, obviously. Jessica Andrade, when and if she comes back to the division. Sure. Some of these younger fighters that are on the come up, maybe. And so I'm really curious to see, was the fight with Dern a great matchup that she was able to succeed and able to do what she needed to do to get the victory? Or has she taken a little bit of a step forward? Is she really, truly a contender? Because look, the opportunity is there for the UFC to do Zhang Weili, Yan Xiaonan, China versus China. Do it in China. Huge fight. Massive fight. I know there are people in the MMA world that are like, I have no interest. Doesn't matter about you and me. Massive fight. I think she's going to have to win one more because a majority decision over Mackenzie Dern coming off a couple losses isn't quite enough to put you into a title fight in my books, in my estimation. And so that fight, that first fight of 2023 is going to be the one that tells me a lot about Yan Xiaonan, both this year and going forward. That's it for the strawweights. That's it for the first of many, many videos in this series. Trust me when I tell you, you are going to see my face every day for the next 8 days. That's what we're doing here. We're going division by division. There weren't that many fighters this time around. There will be more as we get into some of the deeper divisions. And then there will be less to close things out as we hit light heavyweight and heavyweight, they may end up getting paired together, because looking at the spreadsheet, it's pretty sparse. It wouldn't be 45 minutes as this one was. And so listen, I thank you. I appreciate you. I hope there's some names in here that you weren't thinking of. I hope there are some insights, some ideas, some thoughts that get you to add new fighters to your list of fighters that you will be keeping an eye on early in 2023. And I hope you check out the ones that are coming, because we're going to do this division by division, both sides of the gender divide. I'm going to put them together. So tomorrow we will be back with the flyweights. We'll do the women, we'll do the men, and then we're just off and running. Bantamweight, featherweight, away we go. I love this series. This is me. This is my heart, my love of this sport right here. This is the one I look forward to the most every year. Happy to be sharing it with you in this platform, in this medium, on this platform here at SevereMMA. Please check out everything the boys are doing. Subscribe to the Patreon, SevereMMA.com/pints, the best URL in the business. It costs you $5 a month, and it's so worth it. The amount of content that we put out on that thing, trust me, it is worth it. Go sign up. Subscribe to the YouTube page. I will be back once the fights start into the regular swing of things, doing all the stuff we've been doing, taking a little break from a conversation with just to get some stuff lined up and to get through this series, but that will be back as well. Hope you've been enjoying that. I appreciate all the views on those so far. The Brian Campbell one looked like it did really well. So thank you, everybody. And thank you, BC. I'll see you tomorrow for flyweights. Love you. Appreciate you. Happy New Year. Let's go. I'm excited. It's 2023 in the UFC. Let's get it.